Today is Wednesday, January 21st, 2026. The time is 7:01 p.m. Eastern. Welcome to Geopolitical Updates from AGI Era. We begin tonight with a significant escalation in transatlantic relations as the European Union officially suspended approval of a key trade deal with the U.S. This dramatic move comes amidst heightened tensions following President Donald Trump's recent remarks at Davos, where he announced a framework of a future deal on Greenland and simultaneously dropped previous threats of tariffs. While President Trump stated he would not use force to acquire the island, instead floating a possible forever deal, the EU's immediate and forceful response underscores the growing chasm between Washington and Brussels. European leaders are reportedly frustrated, with many viewing the Greenland acquisition push as a disruptive and unilateral action that undermines existing alliances and diplomatic norms. The suspension of the trade deal signals a significant blow to economic cooperation and raises questions about the future of the U.S.-EU relationship, particularly as Europe braces for an emergency EU meeting in Brussels tomorrow. This development represents a critical juncture, indicating a shift from a softly approach to a more assertive stance from Europe in the face of what it perceives as an increasingly unpredictable U.S. foreign policy. The implications for global trade, security, and the balance of power are considerable, marking this as a high-impact event in today's geopolitical landscape. Moving to other pressing global developments, in the Middle East, a devastating Israeli strike in Gaza has reportedly killed 3 journalists and injured 8 other Palestinians. First responders confirmed the fatalities, adding to the ongoing humanitarian crisis in the region. This incident highlights the extreme dangers faced by media personnel covering the conflict and further exacerbates an already volatile situation on the ground. The precise circumstances of the strike remain under investigation, but it underscores the urgent need for de-escalation and protection of civilians and non-combatants in conflict zones. Across Eastern Europe, Ukraine faces severe infrastructural challenges after renewed Russian strikes. Reports indicate that Ukraine's parliament and half of the capital city of Kyiv are now without heating. President Volodymyr Zelensky has stated that Russia is employing far more ballistic missiles in its recent attacks, suggesting a dangerous intensification of the conflict's scope and lethality. The targeting of civilian infrastructure during winter months raises significant concerns about international humanitarian law and the well-being of the Ukrainian population as they endure sustained aggression. In a significant diplomatic maneuver, 7 more Muslim-majority countries have agreed to join President Trump's newly proposed Board of Peace. Furthermore, Russian President Vladimir Putin is reportedly considering joining the initiative. While details of the organization's mandate remain sparse, this development suggests a potential realignment of international diplomatic efforts, with implications for traditional alliances and global governance structures. The inclusion of diverse nations and a major power like Russia could reshape discussions on peace and security outside established multilateral frameworks. East Asia saw a notable energy policy shift as Japan restarted a reactor at the world's largest nuclear plant. This move comes nearly 15 years after the Fukushima meltdown, a disaster that deeply ingrained public caution regarding nuclear power. The restart reflects a pragmatic pivot towards energy security amidst global supply chain uncertainties and climate change commitments, though public apprehension over safety remains a significant domestic factor. Finally, in the ongoing fight against terrorism, the U.S. announced plans to transfer Islamic State prisoners from Syria to Iraq. This strategic redeployment comes as Syrian government forces consolidate control over northeastern areas previously held by Kurdish-led forces. The transfer aims to streamline detention and prosecution efforts for IS combatants, but it also raises concerns about the stability of the regions and the potential for resurgence of extremist elements as power dynamics shift on the ground. Tonight's deep analysis focuses on the rapidly evolving and increasingly tense relationship between the U.S. and the EU, specifically centered on the U.S. pursuit of Greenland and the subsequent suspension of the U.S.-EU trade deal. This confluence of events marks a critical inflection point in transatlantic geopolitics, signaling a potential paradigm shift in global power dynamics. The origins of this latest friction trace back to President Trump's persistent interest in acquiring Greenland, an autonomous territory of Denmark. His recent pronouncements at the World Economic Forum in Davos, where he declared a framework of a future deal on the island, have been met with a mixture of bewilderment and alarm from European capitals. While the president stated his intention not to use force and alluded to a forever deal, the very concept of a sovereign nation attempting to purchase a territory from an allied nation, especially one of such strategic importance, has been deeply unsettling to many. The article, Trump says framework of a future deal, reached on Greenland as he drops tariffs threat, highlights the president's framing of the issue, linking it to broader U.S. security interests and leveraging the threat of tariffs as a bargaining chip. This approach, perceived by many EU leaders as transactional and unilateral, runs counter to the multilateral, consensus-driven diplomacy often favored by Europe. The immediate and profound reaction from the EU underscores the depth of concern. The news that the EU suspends approval of U.S. trade deal is not merely a symbolic gesture. It carries significant economic weight and reflects a calculated political maneuver. The suspension of a trade deal, likely one that has been years in the making and involves substantial economic benefits for both blocs, signals a deliberate hardening of Europe's stance. This action is a direct consequence of the renewed tensions between the U.S. and EU as Donald Trump pushes to acquire Greenland. For Europe, the Greenland issue is not just about a remote Arctic island. It represents a perceived disregard for international norms, a challenge to European unity, and a potential destabilization of the geopolitical order, particularly in the Arctic, a region of increasing strategic importance due to climate change and resource accessibility. The so what for global power dynamics is multifaceted. Firstly, it signals a further erosion of the post-World War II transatlantic alliance, which has been a cornerstone of global security and economic stability. If the U.S. and EU, traditionally close allies, continue to diverge on fundamental foreign policy principles and engage in economic retaliation, it creates a vacuum that other global powers, particularly China and Russia, may exploit. The EU's assertive response indicates a growing willingness to prioritize its own strategic autonomy and push back against U.S. unilateralism, even at the cost of economic ties. This could lead to a more fragmented global order, characterized by shifting alliances and increased regionalization. Secondly, the Greenland affair highlights the increasing commodification of national territories and strategic assets in global diplomacy. The idea of acquiring a territory, even through non-forcible means, raises questions about self-determination and the sovereignty of smaller nations within larger alliances. This could set a dangerous precedent where geopolitical power is overtly measured by the ability to acquire or control territories, rather than through cooperative agreements or shared values. Thirdly, the dispute over Greenland impacts Arctic geopolitics. The Arctic is a region rich in natural resources, and strategically vital shipping lanes are opening due to melting ice. Any shift in the ownership or control of a significant landmass like Greenland has profound implications for military presence, resource extraction, and environmental governance in the Arctic. European nations, many of whom have Arctic territories and interests, will be particularly sensitive to any move that could upset the delicate balance in the region. In essence, the EU's suspension of the trade deal in response to the Greenland push is a powerful message. Traditional allies are prepared to defend their interests and principles, even if it means challenging the U.S. This could lead to a more independent and unified European foreign policy, potentially distancing itself from Washington on various global issues. The current geopolitical landscape is becoming less predictable, with long-standing alliances facing unprecedented strain and the global power balance subtly yet significantly recalibrating. In summary, the past 24 hours have seen a significant deterioration in U.S.-EU relations over the Greenland acquisition initiative, leading to the suspension of a crucial trade deal. Elsewhere, the conflict in Gaza continues to claim civilian lives, including journalists, while Russian strikes have severely impacted heating infrastructure in Ukraine. Meanwhile, a new board of peace gains traction, and Japan makes a calculated return to nuclear power. Our watch list for the next 24 hours includes 1. The emergency EU meeting in Brussels tomorrow, where European leaders will undoubtedly discuss a coordinated response to President Trump's statements and the future of the suspended trade deal. Their collective decision will shape the immediate trajectory of transatlantic relations. 2. Any further diplomatic or military developments regarding the U.S. transfer of IS prisoners from Syria to Iraq, as the regional security implications of this move could be substantial and far-reaching. That's our briefing for today. Thank you for tuning in to Geopolitical Updates from AGI Era.